So now, are we ready to get uncomfortable? Does anyone need anything? Do you need to prepare yourself for discomfort? Think about a conversation that you are dreading having. Think about a conversation maybe in the past or maybe one that you have avoided. Think about what comes up for you and what you feel like when I talk about the idea of addressing something you would rather just have go away. Have you ever found yourself challenged by conversation? Conversations that we avoid, we fear, and sometimes we even dread. Those conversations can be as big as introducing a conversation into a relationship that hasn't been there before, that's going to bring up challenges. It can be having a conversation around honesty. It can be around clearing up misunderstandings. It could be as simple as walking into a space and asking someone to put their mask on when their mask is just over their mouth. Raise your hand if you have been present to the non-mask masking. I one time at a store, just breathing into it, I walked into the store and it said masks required, and the only person that didn't have their mask on was the employee. And the mask was just hovering right under the nose. And some people would say, well, that's your mask on. But I thought to myself, what could I possibly say? And am I willing to just ignore this conversation? And if any of you can feel me here, it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable. I could have just left, or I could have said something, rude or snarky, but I just sat there for a moment and decided whether or not I was going to say something or whether I was just going to try to get by. And I had just recently actually heard about someone getting COVID-19 from an outdoor experience with a neighbor that they didn't have masks on because they thought they were outside and they were about 6 feet away. Maybe every little bit of time they were a little closer. And so I thought to myself, nope, this is your growing experience. And anytime I feel that kind of curdling inside, anytime I feel tension, I feel my shoulders start to come up, I feel a little bit of anxiety or a little lack of confidence, I think to myself, let's look at what this is about. This is an opportunity for growth. This is an opportunity for the practice. And this is something to pay attention to, because when you move through this, you're not just moving through this. Hear me here? You're not just moving through this experience. You are moving through the realm and the field of consciousness that brings up these feelings. So this one is the symbolic experience through which I can process. Anyway, this little experience, I thought, what could I say? And I decided to just say to the person, would you be willing to put your mask on? Which might seem funny because they thought they had their mask on. But to me, that wasn't having your mask on. And it did stop her in her tracks. And she very graciously just said, oh, and put it right back up. But have you always addressed what you feel like you want to or you need to address? Or do you avoid it? Do you shy away because of ideas of the past, of how you've been raised, of the consequences that you might fear or dread? Sometimes we don't communicate and then we just wait till we explode. Has anyone either done that or had that happen to them? Oh yeah, right? You wait and you wait and you wait and you think this isn't that important, or I'm not ready to address this, or I'm dreading it, so I'm just going to set it aside. And then what happens? It knocks on the door itself and it lets itself in. Just comes right over and lets itself in. Coughs all over your space. Just kidding. We all know someone or are someone who says nothing when conflict comes up, who holds on to things and lets them boil or spills or explodes. Sometimes a year later, sometimes far into the future. We could probably have a contest with how long someone's held on to something, how many years before it finally came out. We often grow up, but we don't grow ourselves up. Oftentimes, when we look at our spiritual and our emotional maturity, we find ourselves ill-equipped to navigate an adult life. We find that we do not have the tools to consciously communicate, to navigate difficult discussions, or to recognize that our spiritual practice and our spirituality is entwined with our ability to have conscious communication and conscious conversations. I heard it said once that avoiding conflict is conflict. Avoiding conflict is conflict. But so often we want to avoid conflict. We pray and we pray and we pray for connection, for relationship, for love, for intimacy, for meaning, for depth. Yet when difficult situations arise, when communication is stressed and strained, we disappear. We avoid, we project, we bring out our anger, we do all sorts of things or let all sorts of things happen within us rather than moving straight forward into something consciously. While at the same time, we're praying for this depth, we're praying for this connection, we're praying for authenticity. We want this, but we're not willing to move through the portal by which we can access it. Oftentimes we lose relationships. We end up with anxiety, depression, and recovery. We build things up that could have been minor, and we make them major. Peter Bromberg says, when we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. We trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. We often get into situations where we're passive aggressive or someone else is passive aggressive with us. We use humor for a mask, and that humor can often be hurtful. We end up withholding love or attention, thinking that we're dealing with what's going on, but really we're just manipulating by pulling our love back, pulling our attention back, or offering it when we're pleased. We often turn what could be deep and meaningful relationships or engagements into those which feel superficial, those which lack intimacy, or those which lack trust. And the disconnection that happens sometimes leads us to a feeling of lack, of limitation, of missing out and missing something. And so we go to God, we go to our spiritual practice, but until we're willing to activate the practice on all levels to see that nothing is outside of the realm of our spiritual practice, not even a difficult conversation, we don't always get to say yes to what we're asking for. So we're co-creating one experience while we're begging for another, but unwilling to activate the principles and the practice that will help us demonstrate it so that it can move in and through and as us, not just be handed to us. So are we willing to get uncomfortable? Because ultimately, none of those actions leads us to happiness. None of those actions lead us to true intimacy. And avoiding hard conversations just means we swallow difficult emotions and experiences. And we know what happens when we stuff ourselves. doesn't just go away, it goes somewhere. It goes within. Be brave enough to have conscious conversations. It takes a spiritual practice, because bravery and courage doesn't come from nothing. It comes from vulnerability. It comes from prayer. It comes from getting support. It comes from working the practice and walking our talk. There is a quote I want to share by Sylvester McNutt. Healthy adults talk about problems. We look for solutions. When people hurt us, we communicate with compassion, directly and tactfully. We understand that no connection will last if people hold in all of their anger, pain, and misunderstandings. So isn't that what we want? Don't we want healthy connections? Don't we want to feel light and free? Don't we want to have confidence moving into conscious conversations? Tom Miles says, don't give up at the first signs of friction. Only through clear communication, flexibility, and willingness to adapt can you find a relationship that will weather the storms of life. And we know the work of Brené Brown, always talking about vulnerability. She's talking about vulnerability partially because we can't have growth and expansion without vulnerability. And she says vulnerability is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experiences and meaningful human experience. I don't think there is one individual that engages in a spiritual practice that does not have at the heart of it a desire for meaningful experience. So are we willing to grow ourselves up and get it, to create it, to be just uncomfortable enough that we can grow? It's important to take a deep breath and allow ourselves to look at what we may have learned or been taught or absorbed around conflict. Some of us have been taught to be conflict avoiders. Some of us have been taught that it's righteous to be accommodating, that our role is to be accommodating. Some people have been taught that good people don't bring things up. Good people don't cause trouble. Good people don't complain. And you can fill in the blank. That could be a good wife doesn't complain, a good husband doesn't complain, a good son or daughter or employee. Even that word complain can be charged. So can we take a deep breath and really look at our stuff, look at what we've been taught, look at whether or not we've been raised to be nice and what that costs us. Acknowledging that it often costs us intimacy. It often costs us a connection within our own heart that brings peace. Avoidance is not equivalent to peace. Avoidance is not equivalent to peace. And when we avoid, sometimes things build up so much they feel insurmountable. But the price is our well-being. The price is stress, mind, body, and spirit. The price is often separation and the dissolving of relationships. The price is often anxiety, depression, anger issues. Everyone has a story. Everyone has what they presence within their own being, and then the experiences they have in their relationships, whether it's, someone that you don't know or it's your closest of kin. We've all lost a friend. lost a relationship, maybe lost a job, lost because we felt ill-equipped to navigate spiritually and with emotional intelligence, challenging conscious conversations. So can we take that leap? Can we do a full-bodied invitation to our being to say, teach me, show me, lead me? I'm willing to see my stuff now, and I am excited about a world full of people seeing their stuff and taking it to the next level. So let my growth, let my practice be of benefit to all. As I work through and walk through the challenges that come up for me, let me do it in dedication to all of humanity and the prospering of peace. This is a core issue of the human condition. It's a core issue. It leads nations to war. It leads people into separation and darkness. And it often leads to discord and deep discontent within oneself. So, can we remember our practice? That there is so much to learn about ourselves, our practice, and our communication style when we take everything as a spiritual practice. Can we remember in this spiritual practice that we are all one? In every conversation, we are all one. Can we remember that wisdom is everywhere present? That guidance is everywhere present? That there is no need in conscious communication to teach or to preach? That there's simply a need to be authentic, conscious, and present. To be compassionate, but to also be clear. What's the cost of not being clear? Oh, and kind. I love that. And kind, someone said in the chat room. Yes. And here's the thing, even about kindness, so often we have it in our mind that when we're clear and when we're direct, we're not being kind. But again, what is the cost of that? What is the cost of that? It is immense. It is immense. I'm going to tell you a few stories about not addressing the spirituality needed for clear and conscious communication and how expensive that can be. What the cost is. I remember early on in my time as a Unity minister, I went into a board meeting, and there was one board member, and I don't even remember the behavior, but it was fairly destructive behavior that really needed to be addressed, right? So it was uncomfortable, unhealthy, it needed to be addressed. And I, with my peacekeeping style and wanting not to ruffle feathers, kept just toiling over, what do I do? How do I address this? It's so uncomfortable. And I remember distinctly being in a board meeting and speaking to the issue generally and broadly, saying, you know, this is what the practice, this is what the principle, or this is, you know, what the avenue, this is what's happening, ta, 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 ta. And what do you think happened at the end of the board meeting? When I addressed everyone about what clearly one person had going on. The one person that had the thing going on, clueless, no idea. But you know what did happen? The one or two people that really were exemplary in this area, in this field, that really were incredible, came up to me after and said, I heard you, and did some processing around what they might be doing that is in that field of dysfunction, taking accountability for things I may have not even noticed, or I may not even think lined up with that error thinking or that issue or that problem, right? So the ones that didn't need to hear the message, that in fact should have been celebrated and acknowledged and lifted as an example, were the ones that were self-criticizing, the ones that were working on it, the ones that were sitting there going, ooh, that really is not good if we're doing this. So let me work on my stuff. And I was going, wait, no, 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 no. But what did I learn? You can be more destructive when you're not direct. There are side casualties when we don't have the courage to engage consciously. So I took my discomfort in being with someone or getting whatever support I needed to be with someone and have an awakened conversation. I took my discomfort, and what did I end up doing? I passed that on, getting none of the results I was looking for. Zero. Anyone ever been in that boat? Here's another example. There was a filmmaker, and I have hosted this filmmaker before, and they came out with one film that was fairly good. And then they were coming out with another film. And this film, the topic area was the LGBTQ community. We were all excited for this film to come out because it sounded powerful as far as the storyline and the individual it was about. And we're looking at hosting this film. And when it got to be time and I asked for the film reel to kind of preview it, I looked at it and the quality just wasn't there. It was a great storyline, but as far as its production and the actual quality of a film, it takes a lot to make a film. It's not like an easy thing here, right? And I just took a deep breath thinking this is going to be tough. But I don't think that we can say yes to this. You have to uphold a certain level of production in order to have people want to continue to come to these things. So it was unfortunate, but I declined. I probably declined through an imaginary panel of people that don't exist. Just kidding. Maybe not. Do you hear that? But it was really, really hard to do that. So in my process, I was looking around at other centers to see, who was having this film. And I came across my old center, my old Unity Center. And in putting in the searches around this film, because I was just trying to get more information about the film. And in putting in this search, I found some really sad and disturbing posts, expressions, airing of dirty laundry. So what happened was the production team had gone to the church. Maybe they had a tentative agreement. I don't remember the details of the story, but they were going to be, we're thinking they were going to be showing that film at the church. And then they got a no, they got a rejection. And they recorded the rejection. They recorded the whole conversation with the office personnel that gave them the no. And I took a deep breath as I listened to it. I felt a little bit like I was engaging in People magazine behavior, but I listened to the recording, and it was one of the most valuable gifts I've ever gotten, really, at all, in communication. I could hear the person, and I think it was like, it was like a secret filming, but the person at the center was trying to very politely say, we're not going to be able to have your film. And I don't remember the reasons they gave, but they skirted around any reason that was a solid reason that said, it's just not done in a quality that we would show at our center, right? And I know this center, and I know that matters to them, which is why I was surprised to even find it, because I thought they're going to play it with, how it turned out. And so this was put out online this rejection. And unfortunately, the person sitting in the rejection seat, I can only imagine, didn't want to hurt their feelings. Didn't want to hurt their feelings. This is what I imagine. They really didn't want to hurt their feelings. So they tried to go gently through when, they kept getting asked again, well, what about this? Well, what about that? If we could do it like this, can we? When the person kept pushing and pushing and pushing, they just kept giving these little nice, hopefully this will work. And so what ended up happening? This story went into the papers, I believe. I found a little article on it in the paper, and the link from the office person rejecting them. And how the story was framed was that Unity was not LGBTQ friendly and did not want that content, right? Like it was, I remember reading it and reading what was written there, and just my skin fell off that was the story being shared about a Unity Center, which, especially at that time and even now, is one of the most expansive and inclusive and honoring and welcoming spiritual communities I know of. So for a story to be shared saying that our movement is not friendly to individuals who are living their highest and best life according to their heart's desire, crushed me. And for a moment, it made me mad. For a moment, it made me mad at that individual that shared that story, and glad that I wasn't having the film at our place. But it made me mad that it was worth it to someone to spread that kind of garbage that could keep people out of something that could heal them, help them be exactly what they're looking for. And then I realized the price of lack in our communication. Had that individual that had to give that no just taken a deep breath and in the most loving and compassionate way acknowledged the good and been really clear and direct about why, that person would have gotten feedback. And it's possible there would have been another result. Now, we can't control when we are clear and conscious. We can't control someone else's reaction, so maybe not. But we don't save people when we enable. We just spread the destruction. We just allow what is to get mangled and manipulated and shifted and ooze out however it's going to ooze out. And we know that even when we're conscious, even when we're clear, that happens anyway, doesn't it? That happens anyway. But we tend to think if we can avoid something, if we can just be kind or not hurt someone, there's no price to pay. But being kind and having an intention not to hurt someone is different than being able to stand in your spiritual power, in your emotional maturity, and give a grounded, authentic, honest, even when it's difficult, response. With less fallout, or fallout that's more in line with the actual situation or circumstance. There are a lot of times in spiritual centers, I've heard these stories over and over and over. I call it the deer and the bulls, that there are a whole load of deer in a spiritual community. And they are just sweet and loving and accommodating, and they accept any kind of behavior that comes up with love and graciousness and acceptance and peace. Give me a little nod if you know where I'm going. And then there are some bulls. And oftentimes, a lot of people know about the bowls, but everyone just dances around them, scoots away. And what happens so often is that because people aren't willing to deal with what is theirs to deal with, or be with what is in front of them, or follow up when it comes to them, it creates a really dysfunctional situation. Just like Peter Bromberg said, we trade discomfort for long-term dysfunction. And we can get a lot of dysfunctional centers. I have seen centers that have held on to a music director because they were there so long, or they held on to an office manager or a finance person or someone because they had been there and no one wanted to hurt their feelings, or even a volunteer, but they were the one that was willing to get it done. Well, forget the fact that 10 out of every 11 people walk right out the door after they greet that person. Or 4 out of every 5 volunteers that have to interact with that person decide, I don't want to volunteer here, I'm just going to sit. Or 98% of the young people that walk in the door walk back out because of the music. Or a series of ministers end up leaving over and over and over again because they're at the mercy of an office person that's like, this is my boat and I drive it. And you can just sit over in your room and give talks. What is the expense? A thriving movement. That's the expense. Lives saved. That's the expense. Spiritual growth and abundance. That's the expense. And we are here for spiritual growth and abundant living. So, what are the things we are present to? Because it's easy to hear someone else's story and see the fallout and go, ooh, yeah, that's not worth it. That is exchanging some serious discomfort with dysfunction. Are we willing to live like that? Are we willing to keep looking away? Are we willing to keep allowing our fears to have space inside of us? Because what happens inside of us is often fear. Fear instead of faith. We're afraid of offending. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of not seeming kind. We can't trust ourselves. Maybe sometimes we can't even trust our reaction. We don't know if I start to go into that conversation, I don't know that I can do it. I have a history of people telling me I'm not good at these conversations. So I'm afraid even of myself. I'm afraid of losing it. I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. Sometimes it's control or power. And we need spiritual strength. I'm not in the power seat in this relationship, so I can't have a conscious conversation. They've got a hold on me in some way, financially, physically, emotionally, situationally, power differential, employment, whatever it is. Spiritually, can we shift from thinking conversations are difficult into inviting them to be conscious? Inviting them to be conscious. Because when we invite in conscious conversations, yes, along the way as we're growing, we may make mistakes. We probably will. We may say things in ways that are not tactful, graceful. But when we embrace our vulnerability, we can bring even that to the conversation. We can even have the vulnerability to stand in one of those conversations and say, I am currently sick to my stomach. I am currently quivering inside because you are important to me, because I don't want to lose this relationship, because I don't want to lose my job, because you fill in the blank, whatever it is. I don't want to hurt your feelings by saying something that I'm experiencing. But because I care, I'm going to give it a go. Because it matters to me, I'm going to try it. Because I have a commitment to clear and conscious conversations, here I am. Because we all know on the other side of it, when someone's not willing to have the conversation with us, sometimes it's about fear and all that, but sometimes it's because they stopped caring. Sometimes it's because we just don't think they're worth it anymore, or they don't think we're worth it. And yes, there are times to look at whether or not a conversation is worth it. And there are times when we know our wisdom is telling us there's no point. We just have to choose this relationship as is, right? Choose it as is, even with its lack of intimacy, even if it's lack of honesty, even whatever it is, because it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to grow. And we have to just have a conversation with ourselves around whether or not we're okay with that. Or we can look at all the times that a conscious conversation can bring in incredible depth and intimacy, that we can change that childhood fear, that childhood experience, or those childhood skills where we don't think that we can navigate it, and we can actually be a conscious connector. Far too often, we dismiss these conversations and we stay quiet. But what we lose when we stay quiet is great. And the gifts that are there when we're willing to grow are immense. And they prosper so many areas of our lives that we're not even aware of. There is so much that can be learned. There is so much that can be learned by taking an inventory, taking a deep breath, and sharing. And we can also remember that when people share with us, we can remember sometimes what it feels like and what it takes. And we can remember that even though it can be uncomfortable sometimes, it means someone cares. It means they're showing up. It means you're worth it. So can you breathe into that? Can we breathe into that and let go of our ego responses and celebrate the vulnerability and the invitation into intimacy? Some things will keep coming back to us in various forms until we deal with them head on. Some things will keep coming back to us. They may shapeshift. They may hop through individuals, but they will keep coming back to us until we've gotten the gift, until we grab the growth. The gift is that when we consciously communicate, we know where we stand. People know where we stand. We make less assumptions. People make less assumptions. It shows that we value our time and our relationship. It allows us the opportunity to express our truth. So the next time a challenging conversation knocks at your door, consider the spiritual practice. Breathe. Check in and do an inventory to see what's going on within. Pray in, ask for the words, have the conversation, and bless and release. Be really clear about your own positive intention and try to look through whatever is showing up on any side of the conversation. Try to look straight through it to get clear on your positive intention and to get theirs, or to even ask what theirs is. Tell me your positive intention through bringing this up. It's worth it. When We are not attached to the outcome and the result, but we are genuinely attached to serving, being helpful, being clear, being light. We have a whole different experience. So let's not miss the gift. Let's not separate spirituality and our ability to communicate, because what is on the other side are conscious conversations that bring us closer together and closer to God. And that's something that we all want. Namaste.